You wake up at 6:30, commute 45 minutes, sit under fluorescent lights for 8 hours, commute back, eat dinner, scroll your phone until your brain goes numb, sleep, and then do it all over again. You do this 260 days a year, year after year, decade after decade, trading the only non-renewable resource you possess, your time, for a fixed amount of dollars that the Federal Reserve is actively devaluing at a rate of roughly 7% per year when you account for real inflation, not the sanitized CPI numbers they feed the public. And here's the brutal, paradoxical truth that no one in your life has ever told you. The harder you work within the system, the more trapped you become. The promotion you are chasing, the raise you're negotiating, the corner office you are eyeing, these are not steps toward freedom. They are golden chains. They are the system's way of making you a more efficient battery, a more productive unit of labor extraction, while ensuring you never accumulate the one thing that actually separates the wealthy from everyone else. That thing is not money. It is leverage. And until you understand what leverage truly means and how it operates across 4 distinct dimensions, you will remain on what I call the linear income treadmill, running faster and faster, going absolutely nowhere, wondering why you feel exhausted despite doing everything right. My name is Godwin. Today, I am pulling back the curtain on the wealth creation mechanism that the top 1% understands intuitively, but that remains invisible to the 99% who fund their lifestyles through labor alone. We are going to dissect the 4 types of leverage: labor, capital, code, and media, and I am going to show you exactly how each one functions, who benefits from each, and most importantly, which ones you can access right now regardless of your current financial position. If you value high-level financial clarity over the surface-level noise that dominates this platform, you may want to join this network by subscribing. This is not entertainment. This is education that could fundamentally alter your economic trajectory. Let us begin. To understand leverage, you must first understand why the traditional advice you have received your entire life is designed to keep you in place. The American dream narrative: go to college, get a good job, work hard, contribute to your 401k, retire at 65, is not a wealth-building framework. It is a wealth maintenance framework for those who already have capital and a labor extraction framework for those who do not. When you contribute to a traditional 401k, you are giving the IRS an interest-free loan with the promise that they will tax you at an unknown future rate when you withdraw. When you clock in at your 9 to 5, you are generating value for shareholders while receiving a fraction of that value in the form of wages. The system is not broken. It is working exactly as designed. It is designed to create leverage for those at the top by extracting leverage from those at the bottom. Your job is not to complain about this system. Your job is to understand it deeply enough to position yourself on the correct side of the equation. Leverage at its core is the ability to generate disproportionate output from a given input. It is asymmetric upside. It is the reason a single decision by a hedge fund manager can generate more wealth in an afternoon than a factory worker can produce in a lifetime of labor. And while that example may seem extreme, the principle scales down to every level of economic activity. The question is not whether leverage exists. The question is whether you are using it or whether it is being used against you. With that foundation established, let us examine the 4 forms of leverage and understand how each one can be accessed, deployed, and compounded over time. The first and oldest form of leverage is labor leverage, and it is simultaneously the most intuitive and the most limited. Labor leverage means using other people's time and effort to multiply your output. This is a leverage of the entrepreneur who hires employees, the manager who oversees a team, the business owner who scales through headcount. When you employ someone, you are essentially renting their 40 hours per week and deploying it toward your objectives. If you hire 10 people, you now have 400 hours of productive capacity per week instead of 40. This is multiplication, not addition. This is leverage. However, labor leverage comes with significant friction and limitation. Every employee requires management, training, benefits, HR compliance, payroll taxes, and the constant emotional labor of human coordination. The IRS requires you to withhold and remit payroll taxes. You are subject to workers' compensation requirements, potential lawsuits, and the general unpredictability of human behavior. Labor leverage is powerful, but it does not scale cleanly. It requires constant reinvestment of your time and attention. Every additional unit of labor leverage you acquire comes with a marginal increase in complexity. This is why companies with thousands of employees still struggle with profitability, while solo creators with no employees generate millions in revenue. Labor leverage was a dominant form for centuries because it was the only option available. Today, it remains essential for certain business models, but it is no longer the asymmetric advantage it once represented. The modern path to wealth runs through forms of leverage that are less capital-intensive and more scalable. The second form of leverage is capital leverage, and this is where the American financial system reveals its true architecture. Capital leverage means using money, specifically other people's money, to generate returns. This is a leverage of Wall Street, of private equity, of venture capital, of real estate investors who finance properties with mortgages. When a real estate investor purchases a $500,000 property with $100,000 down and finances the rest, they're using $400,000 of the bank's capital to generate returns. If that property appreciates 10%, the investor gains $50,000 in equity from a $100,000 investment, a 50% return on their capital. This is the magic of leverage. This is why real assets outperform savings accounts over time. The wealthy understand that the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, keeping interest rates low, expanding the money supply, maintaining inflation targets, systematically benefits asset owners at the expense of wage earners and savers. When the Fed prints money, it does not distribute that money equally across the population. It enters the economy through financial institutions, flowing first to those with access to capital markets, banks, corporations, institutional investors, before trickling down to wages and consumer prices. By the time it reaches your paycheck, the purchasing power has already been diluted. This is not conspiracy theory. This is monetary mechanics. Capital leverage allows you to position yourself on the receiving end of the system rather than the paying end. However, capital leverage requires capital, and acquiring significant capital through wages alone takes decades. This creates a barrier to entry that keeps most Americans locked into the linear income paradigm. Furthermore, capital leverage carries risk. Borrowing money to invest and amplify losses just as effectively as it amplifies gains. The 28-year-old with a $100,000 net worth cannot deploy the same capital leverage strategies as a 55-year-old with $2 million in liquid assets. This brings us to the two forms of leverage that have democratized wealth creation in ways that previous generations could not have imagined. The third form of leverage is code leverage, and this is a leverage of the technological elite, the founders, the developers, the builders of digital infrastructure. Code leverage means creating software, algorithms, or automated systems that perform tasks without requiring your direct involvement. When you write a piece of code, you are creating a tireless worker that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, without requiring a salary, benefits, sleep, or motivation. Code does not call in sick. Code does not negotiate for raises. Code does not require management oversight. Code executes your logic at scale with near zero marginal cost. This is why software companies trade at valuations that seem absurd by traditional metrics. A software company with 100 employees can serve millions of customers because the code itself is doing the labor. The developers are not producing the output directly. They are building machines that produce the output infinitely. Consider the economic difference between a traditional tax preparation business and a company like TurboTax. The traditional business requires hiring accountants, training them, managing schedules, renting office space, and serving clients one at a time. Revenue scales linearly with headcount. TurboTax, in contrast, invested up front in building software that asks users questions, processes their answers, and generates tax returns automatically. The marginal cost of serving an additional customer is essentially zero. The leverage is nearly infinite. Code leverage is the reason a 23-year-old programmer can build an application in their bedroom that generates more revenue than a manufacturing plant with 300 workers. The inputs are time, skill, and creativity. The output is a leverage machine that works forever. Now, you might be thinking that code leverage requires technical skills you do not possess. This is true in the most literal sense, but it is also true that code leverage can be acquired rather than built. Buying equity in technology companies is a form of accessing code leverage. Investing in ETFs that track the technology sector gives you fractional ownership of the leverage machines being built by the most talented engineers on the planet. A Roth IRA invested in growth-oriented technology funds allows you to compound code leverage gains tax-free for decades. You do not need to write a single line of code to benefit from this form of leverage. You simply need to understand that it exists and position your capital accordingly. The fourth form of leverage, and the one I believe offers the most asymmetric opportunity for individuals starting from zero, is media leverage. Media leverage means creating content that can be distributed infinitely at zero marginal cost. A YouTube video, a podcast episode, a Twitter thread, a newsletter. These are digital assets that work for you while you sleep, broadcasting your ideas, building your reputation, and generating revenue long after you've moved on to other projects. The video I am creating right now is an example of media leverage. I record it once. I invest a fixed number of hours in research, writing, and production. But once it is published, it can be watched by one person or 1 million people, and my effort remains constant. If this video reaches 100,000 viewers, I have effectively communicated with 100,000 individuals without speaking to any of them directly. Try achieving that through one-on-one conversations. It would take years. It would consume your entire life. Media leverage compresses that time to near instantaneous distribution. And here's a critical insight that separates media leverage from the other three. It requires no labor, no capital, and no code to begin. You do not need to hire employees. You do not need investment capital or access to credit markets. You do not need programming skills or technical infrastructure. You need a smartphone, an internet connection, and the willingness to create. The barriers to entry have never been lower. The potential upside has never been higher. This is the asymmetric opportunity of our generation. But let me be absolutely clear about something. The democratization of media leverage does not mean success is easy or guaranteed. Quite the opposite. Because the barriers to entry are so low, the competition is immense. Millions of creators are producing content every single day. The supply of media has exploded while human attention remains fixed. To build effective media leverage, you must become exceptional. You must develop a unique perspective, a distinctive voice, a depth of insight that separates you from the noise. You must understand that media leverage compounds over time, but requires years of consistent output before the compounding becomes visible. Most creators quit before the inflection point. They create for 6 months, see minimal results, conclude that it does not work, and return to trading time for money. The ones who break through are the ones who understand that media leverage is a long-term capital allocation decision, not a short-term revenue strategy. You are not creating content. You are building a distribution asset that will pay dividends for decades. Now, here's the question I want you to sit with, and I genuinely want you to answer in the comments because your response will reveal more about your mindset than any financial metric ever could. Which form of leverage are you currently building? And which one are you ignoring because it feels uncomfortable or unfamiliar? Are you still operating purely on linear income, trading hours for dollars, hoping that raises and promotions will eventually free you? Are you deploying capital leverage through real estate, equities, or business investments, using the financial systems tools for your own benefit? Are you building or investing in code leverage, understanding that software is the new labor force and that equity ownership in technology is equity ownership in automated productivity? Or are you building media leverage, creating assets that broadcast your ideas, attract opportunities, and establish authority in domains that matter to you? The answer to this question will determine your financial trajectory more than your credit score, your 401k balance, or your annual salary. Because at the end of the day, the paycheck is not the goal. The paycheck is a symptom of operating without leverage. True financial independence comes not from earning more, but from multiply the impact of every hour you invest. It comes from understanding that the game is not about working harder within the system. It is about building systems that work for you. My name is Godwin, and this is a clarity I bring to every video on this channel. If this perspective resonated with you, consider what else you might be missing by not being part of this community. Subscribe, engage, and begin building your leverage today. Because time is the one resource you cannot buy back. And every day you spend trading for linear income is a day you are not compounding your future.